Support for This News is So Gay comes from the LGBTQ Opportunity Fund of the Cleveland Foundation, leveraging philanthropy to empower LGBTQ communities. Welcome to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck, editor of The Buckeye Flame, Ohio's LGBTQ newsroom. Thanks so much for joining us. Here's what we've got coming up on this week's episode, the last of 2025. Book banning. Apparently, that's still a thing. Where is the latest LGBTQ book banning attempt here in the United States? HIV stigma. That also is very much still a thing. How is it affecting online dating? 2025 was quite the year. What are some of the stories that we are walking away with as we leave this year behind? And of course, queer joy. Where is our roundtable finding queer joy in the news right now? Joining us this week to answer those questions and so many more, investigative journalist and lead designer at Uncloseted Media, an investigative media company providing you with objective, nonpartisan, rigorous, original journalism that examines America's anti-LGBTQ landscape and elevates everyday American heroes. Pause to take breath. Sam Donndelinger. Sam, welcome back to the podcast.
Hello, I'm so happy to be back. Thank you for having me.
I will say that when I did that intro a few weeks ago with Spencer McNaughton, I was able to do it without a breath. This day, I didn't get through it, but I'll do better.
My name's a couple letters longer,
yeah.
So I'll give it to you.
I appreciate that. And senior director, not director, senior director of local news for the U.S. South for GLAAD, the nonprofit organization focused on LGBTQ advocacy and cultural change. Darian Aaron. Darian, what a pleasure to have you back on the podcast.
Hey, Ken, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be back. I had a promotion since we last spoke.
I was going to say, Darian, I don't know if you know, that was not your title last time you were on this show.
No, it was not. No, the GLAAD gods have been really good to me, and I'm moving on up.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Sam, I decided you are senior lead designer, so just you can change your LinkedIn right away.
Fantastic. Oh, thank you, Ken.
It comes with no pay bump. Our LGBTQ Reporters Roundtable is now assembled, so let's dive in. Darian, we have to start with the attempt by a Tennessee county and Tennessee state officials to have LGBTQ book titles removed from libraries. I have tried to not cover this topic until you were going to be on the podcast, even though Christopher Wiggins from The Advocate was on a few weeks back. But we saved this mostly for you. Tell us what happened here.
Yeah, Ken, I'd love to share what's happening on the ground in Tennessee. Unfortunately, we continue to see efforts across the country to relocate or completely ban books from library shelves by LGBTQ and African American authors. Conservative politicians and residents in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, which is a suburb right outside of Nashville, they have launched an all-out assault on inclusive books and libraries in Rutherford County. What's happening there is a troubling new page in the book ban era. And in an unprecedented move, the director of libraries for the Rutherford County Library System requested whistleblower protection out of fear of termination by board chairman and Rutherford County Chief Information Officer Cody York. In remarks delivered during a December 1st library board meeting, the director was visibly shaken as she informed the board that York demanded she provide an Excel spreadsheet with the names of patrons, their addresses, zip codes, book barcodes, the number of children and adults in each household, and what books they were checking out. And this all happened within 2 days of her uprooting her family to relocate south to assume the role in late July. And if the events that led to the director's request for whistleblower protection weren't alarming enough, Ken, 181 libraries in the Tennessee Regional Library System received letters from the Secretary of State in October requiring a full audit of the library's juvenile books to better align with Trump's anti-trans executive order issued on January 20th. And at least 2 branches in Rutherford County were closed from November 10th through the 15th, so staff could review nearly, wait for the number, nearly 60,000 books for LGBTQ content to be considered for removal. Now, just imagine the cost to taxpayers, staff time, and public resources to have the libraries closed so no one can go there just to pursue these harmful efforts. But on a bright side, I have to tell you, over the past year, I've had the pleasure of working with Carrie Lambert. She's the vice president of the Rutherford County Library Alliance. We worked together on coverage regarding this issue in Newsweek and The Advocate. The Alliance is at the forefront of efforts to push back against book censorship in Tennessee. I was able to connect Carrie with our good friend Christopher Wiggins, who did some incredible reporting on this story for The Advocate earlier this month. Now, Carrie always reminds folks that the library board already has an opt-out graduated library card system that denies anyone under the age of 18 the right to access any information not in their assigned area, including nonfiction and reference materials for school or other educational needs, unless their parents physically come into the library to fill out a form. Now, I have to agree with many advocates on the ground in Tennessee that these book ban efforts are simply an attempt to erase LGBTQ people, as if we're not already born and raised and
Right.
fully immersed in these communities across the country, and deserving of our experiences being reflected in literature as well. Um, I'm always reminded of this one advocate that we work with in Alabama who says they're trying to define who is an acceptable and valid human being in public spaces. Books are simply a proxy for people.
And it's such a privileged point of view to close a library if you obviously don't understand all the different things that people use libraries for. Or we've had that here in Ohio as well, where they've had to shut down libraries because they're reviewing books. And so libraries, we're talking about book banning. And as I was reading through this and all the different materials, Sam, this made me think about the piece that you all worked on at Uncloseted about teachers being on the front line of, again, LGBTQ plus erasure. We spoke with Spencer McNaughton about this piece a few weeks ago, but I would love to get your take, maybe not in a Canadian accent. What did you walk away with in helping to create that piece?
It was a really powerful piece for me to work on. And I usually try to keep my own emotions out of my pieces, especially with panels. I usually just try to let the people talk and let Spencer do his thing when he's interviewing the folks. But this one was really emotional for me because it was a panel of teachers from all around the US, and some of them were allies, some of them were in the LGBTQ community. And they were sharing their experiences and just their frustration with the censorship and the fear of not being able to teach content that they feel is important, and also to hide their own identities at school and just the constant fear that they're living in. And something that really struck me about this piece was the difference in location. So we had one teacher, Alyssa, who lives in Queens, and she was teaching at a public school in Queens, and she had a lot more flexibility with what she was allowed to say, what she was allowed to teach. She was able to bring in LGBTQ authors, and she had so much joy and passion for what she was teaching, and you could tell when she was talking about her students and her classes and just how supportive that the system was to her. And then we spoke with Marty as well, who was in North Carolina, who was in utter shock when she heard Alyssa's story on the panel and chimed in with that would never be allowed in North Carolina, and just how many restrictions she has, and how, she was placed on academic leave for asking students their pronouns. So just the difference across the country too, and teachers having to navigate that when that's not really their job. They should just be able to work with their students.
Yeah, it's one of the many reasons that I'm walking away from higher education. I mean, in my other life as being a tenured professor of education where I teach the teachers, and they always call me in to talk to the teachers in training about, well, how can we talk about LGBTQ plus issues in the classroom? And increasingly the answer is you can't here in Ohio. And you can't, well, I'll just have children's books. No, actually, according to state law now, you can't have children's books that are LGBTQ plus inclusive. So it's rough. It's rough out there. And yeah, I don't think that's why people got into teaching. I don't think that that was really the reason there. We will, of course, as always, keep our eyes on that educational sector. We are a month past World AIDS Day, and somehow I am still obsessed with thinking about the Trump administration's declaration to not recognize World AIDS Day. We've covered it twice before on the show. I'm slightly getting near it right now. But what I want to do is counter the narrative that the Trump administration's putting out there with work that's actually being done to create dialogue around HIV and AIDS, and you both are involved in that work. Darian, there was a great event in Alabama to highlight HIV care and community. Tell us about that gathering.
Yeah, I'd love to. I am a native of Alabama, born and raised in Montgomery. So there's not too many opportunities to be proud of the stuff that happens in my home state, but I'm really proud of the work that advocates are doing on the ground in Alabama. On November 18th, to speak to your question, Ken, AIDS Alabama, in partnership with the University of Alabama at Birmingham's Center for the Study of Sexual and Gender Health, they hosted a free community film screening of Rise Together, Stories of Health and Resilience. The event centered around the RISE program, which is a peer-led intervention designed to support people of color in managing HIV treatment, PrEP, and other chronic health conditions. My colleague, Ty Ballard, who is a Birmingham resident, reported this story for GLAAD. And it parallels a similar World AIDS Day event that I covered in Atlanta for GLAAD that also utilized a documentary format to share HIV prevention messaging. But beyond that, it provided a multi-dimensional narrative of people who are living and thriving with HIV, as such characters are increasingly disappearing from TV and film. The Power of Emory Compass is a 30-minute documentary from the Emory Compass Coordinating Center, and it is a public narrative of the work and strategies to address HIV stigma in care through community-centered funding, training, and collaborative learning across the South. And in the South, it's a region that comprises 52% of HIV diagnoses, so it is still a major issue here in this part of the country. But the thing that's so significant about these two documentaries is that they arrive at a time when there is a considerable HIV knowledge gap among Generation Z. Now, GLAAD research has found that only 37% of Gen Z age people, ranging from ages 18 to 26, said they feel knowledgeable about HIV. Now, this is the most out generation in history, and they know the least about HIV.
Ooh.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that there are so few films and TV shows with characters living with or dealing with HIV. Gen Z is simply not getting the information they need to stay healthy and safe, and it pushes the goal of ending HIV that much further out of reach.
It also just makes me think, I don't really understand your job, Darian Aaron. I have to imagine that doing this work in the South is categorically different than if you were in Ohio or in New York. I will be very upfront. I have never been to Alabama. I have been to Arkansas, but I'm told those are not the same thing. So these are the
Not at
things that
all.
I learn, right? How different do you think it is doing the work that you do in the US South?
That is a very important question, and I'm so glad you asked that because I believe it's widely known and accepted in HIV circles. We like to call it HIV Inc., that HIV remains a public health threat in communities of color in the South. Data on new HIV diagnoses among Black, gay, and bisexual men and Black trans and cis women are readily available and constantly dissected. But this rarely gets at the underlying accelerants that fuel stigma, including racism, poverty, access to affordable health care, education, and transportation that allow HIV to flourish in these communities. We are not seeing solutions to these determinants prioritized in a culturally specific and non judgmental way that creates a pipeline to holistic treatment. I believe HIV stigma remains one of the greatest barriers to ending HIV in this region, along with education and equitable access to PrEP, which, in the absence of a vaccine, is the greatest prevention tool we have to stop an increase in new HIV diagnoses. But I always like to look for the positive. On the bright side, there are incredible HIV advocates across the South, like Dr. Daniel Driffin, Leisha McKinley Beach, Dr. Shakita Jones, who is based in Alabama, and Dr. David Melbranch, just to name a few. There's tons of more people doing incredible work. But these public health professionals have embedded themselves in the communities they serve, and they've earned the people's trust. They're not relying on outdated health models, but they are listening, learning, and meeting those at risk for acquiring HIV where they are. And GLAAD is also tackling this HIV knowledge gap through our Generation Z and HIV HBCU tour, which kicked off in October at Jackson State University.
What I hear you saying is you're going to take me on a tour of Montgomery.
You know what? It is a tourist destination for some.
Okay.
Sadly, most of the major attractions, traffic and racism. That's what our state is known for. We have the Legacy Museum, which is absolutely incredible. I would highly recommend that you visit when you're in Montgomery. But yeah, it's just a dark history that if we don't recognize it, we are doomed to repeat it. And so Montgomery does a really good job of amplifying that history.
Well, you mentioned stigma, and we have to talk about stigma, HIV stigma. Sam, you wrote an amazing piece on HIV stigma, specifically in online dating. What did you learn there?
Yeah, thank you, Ken. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that stat, Darian, about Gen Z being the least educated generation about HIV. And when I read that, I was like, that can't be true. That we're always online. I'm Gen Z. We're always online. We're always like on social media. Like, how do we not know enough about HIV? And it got me thinking, well, what does that do for people who are dating, especially navigating dating online, on the apps? And so this piece focused on Cody Nestor, who is 19, and he's from Florida, and his experience with navigating Grindr, dating apps, how to date in a Gen Z world when you have HIV, when you're living with HIV. And I was really surprised by his experience. He was so candid in sharing his story, and he said 90% of his messages on Grindr are hateful, rude, harmful in some way, just because he has HIV undetectable in his bio. Another study found that 64 respondents would feel uncomfortable having sex with someone living with HIV, even if they're on effective treatment. So those stats really shocked me, then coupled with the story from Cody and a few other folks who were brave enough to share their stories living with HIV and how they're navigating the dating world right now.
Who are the 10% of Americans who don't believe that HIV stigma is still a thing? Who do we know them? Can we name them? Are they? We'll invite them. We'll invite them on the show. And by the way, I have to do a little shout out to Juan Michael Porter II, frequent guest here on This News is So Gay, who wrote a piece for us at the Buckeye Flame about his experiences being on dating apps here in Ohio as someone living with HIV and what he encountered. But it again pivots back to that regional aspect. I have to imagine, Sam, that this piece would have looked different if perhaps it had been a rural individual that you had spoken with. For so many of our rural siblings, the apps are the only way that they have to interact with someone else who has an LGBTQ plus identity.
Yeah, I think yes and no. Part of the story, we wanted to focus on different regions. And my editor, Spencer, said, let's get someone in a really progressive city and see what their experience is. So we spoke with Damian Jack from Brooklyn, New York, which is a pretty progressive part of the States. And he also experienced way more stigma than he expected and when I expected reporting the piece. And he said on the apps, but also outside of the apps. He remembers the day he was diagnosed, he had a date later that night, and he was like, I don't know, do I go? Do I not go? And his doctor encouraged him to go, and his friends encouraged him to go. And he went on the date, had a great time, and he disclosed his status, and it was just a really hateful response, even in New York City, where you would think people would understand and would be educated. And he's not even Gen Z, so there's just no excuse.
This is why we're all moving to Montgomery. We're all going together. So let's start packing. Yes, Darian.
Ken, if I may, I just want to give Sam her flowers because that piece was so well written. We actually shared it across GLAAD social media platforms, and I was just so happy to see the perspective of the men that you interviewed included in that piece. I can recall being single, I'm married now, and being on dating apps and constantly getting messages from folks asking me, are you clean? And it's stigmatizing language like that I absolutely despise. And if anything, I wish we could change how we communicate on dating apps regarding HIV status because, of course, I'm clean. I shower every day. If you're asking me about my HIV status, then just come out and use the appropriate language. And then we can have
Mm.
a conversation about that because it definitely needs to be had, especially if you are considering having sexual intercourse with someone. But yeah, I was just really, really happy to see that piece. And thank you so much for writing it.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I mean, I used your report, so you helped with the piece a lot.
I wasn't part of this at all, but I want to get in here. It was wonderful stuff. This is great. I will just say I'm going to now work on a piece for GLAAD and Uncloseted Media just to find the 10% of people who don't believe HIV stigma exists. So that is my new journey. Know that it's coming. Well, it is only a few days from 2026, probably when folks are listening to this, only a few hours. So let's look back a little bit at some stories that jumped out at my panel this week. And holy crap, it was a really long year. Darian, what's one of those GLAAD-related stories that really made you pause in 2025?
I hate to go back to book bans, but it took up so much of our headspace and our bandwidth as a team this year, pushing back against them. But before we had the situation in Tennessee, I was working with local media to amplify a similar story right in my backyard in South Georgia, where Lavonia Moore, a Pierce County library manager and a 15-year library veteran, was fired when a child at the library asked her to include the book When Aiden Became a Brother
Mm.
by author Cal Lukoff, an award-winning age-appropriate story about love and acceptance that happens to feature a trans character. Moore didn't hesitate to honor the patron's wish to include the book, which had a rainbow on the cover, in an exhibit that every public library in the U.S. celebrated as part of its national summer reading program. As a result, she was abruptly fired. This story definitely gave me pause and served as yet another reminder that freedom isn't necessarily free and must be protected at all costs.
So much work to do. Sam, how about for you at Uncloseted Media? What's one of those 2025 stories that you're walking away with?
When I went to journalism school, I was interested in so many different beats and so many different intersections. But tech was never something I ever wanted to write about. I was like, I don't understand it. I don't think it relates to my life. I don't want to write about it. But I was assigned a piece on meth addiction within the gay community. And I wanted to do something sort of different with the piece and look at meth addiction from a different angle. And so I went really underground into dating apps and the tech scene for apps and how they're fueling the meth addiction crisis among gay men. And I was shocked at some of the findings and just speaking with people how the apps make recovery really hard, make sobriety really hard, and 91% of queer dating app users had a negative experience with drugs on the apps, and 1 in 4 dating app users actually deleted an app being related to drug addiction. And so that story was really interesting because I had never written anything like that, and I'm not very familiar with the tech space and the dating app space. I guess now we've done the HIV stigma story as well, focused on dating apps. But yeah, I didn't realize how much tech could be fueling such a prominent crisis among the gay community. So that story was really eye-opening for me to report and write.
Yeah, Sam, that's 2 stories. You now are the tech beat reporter for Uncloseted Media. I would add that on there right this second. We had Mark S. King on the show last week. We were talking about blogging with Mark S. King and Sue Kerr. And Mark was actually on my old radio show, This Show Is So Gay, which oddly every episode still exists online, all 430 of them. And I remember this has got to be like 11 years ago. And I was on the apps back then. And I remember him telling me if anyone ever says to you, you know, any intimations on, do you want to go do meth, highlight for them a recovery option and watch how quickly you get blocked every time. But every now and then someone won't block you and they might take that in. And I was fascinated by that. And I actually did that. And I got blocked every time. But maybe someone took that in. But it was a fascinating little intersection and a chance to shout out This Show Is So Gay. You all are listening to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck from the Buckeye Flame. Joining me this week, Sam Donndelinger from Uncloseted Media and Darian Aaron from GLAAD. By the by, friends, if you are not subscribed to This News is So Gay, what the heck are you waiting for? Subscribe to this podcast right this very second on your favorite podcasting app so that new episodes automatically make their way to you. Well, it is time, folks, for Glitter Bomb. This is the segment where our roundtable shares stories of queer joy that they are seeing covered in the news. So let's set off a glitter bomb. Sam, let's start with you. I actually think I know what story you're going to choose, and so I'm kind of curious to see if I'm right. So you go, and then I'll tell you which one I think you're going to do.
Well, I really wanted to do a story that Spencer didn't do. So I intentionally chose one I don't think that he did. Right now I'm working on a story about polyamory and legal protections for poly folks. And I am so inspired by the small cities who are putting forth bills to be passed in their small cities to protect polyamory people. So there's one in Somerville, there's one in Berkeley, Oakland, Cambridge, Arlington, and just the power of people coming together, drafting these legislations and getting them in front of the right people. So that's one story of positivity I did not expect to find when I was researching protections for polyamorous people. And then the other story, maybe Spencer talked about this, but we did an interview with Erica Dusso, who was the first transgender mayor elected for any town in Pennsylvania, and she's the mayor of Downingtown, Pennsylvania now, and her term just started. And so we had an amazing interview with her talking about her campaign and connecting with the community, and that there are amazing people supporting her who want her in office, who see beyond her gender identity and think she just has amazing things to do for the community. So that was also just such an uplifting interview to see and to be a part of.
I would have lost the bet. I thought you were going to choose a message of hope for LGBTQ kids in America. It's right there on the homepage. I thought that was going to be the queer joy story.
I literally didn't even think about that one. My head was so many other places, but you're right. We just published that. I don't know why I didn't think of that one.
I love it. Darian Aaron, give us some queer joy. What are you seeing out there?
I would love to, Ken. I have to say that I love this part of the show. I mean, just the name itself, Glitter Bomb, it doesn't get much gayer than that. So I recently worked with Deasia Page. She's a cultural reporter at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on an amazing piece about trans superstar T.S. Madison and the T.S. Madison Starter House. Madison has transformed her first home, better known as the Marvelous Chateau, into a transitional living space for formerly incarcerated Black trans women and sex workers, offering these women stability and safety, some for the first time. And the thing that I love the most about this piece is that the majority of Americans say that they don't personally know someone of trans experience. And one way that they get to know trans folks is through accurate and powerful storytelling. And so anytime that I get to work with reporters to develop stories about trans people, specifically trans folks of color living in the South, I'll always jump at the opportunity. And Deasia does such an amazing job with LGBTQ reporting. She really does handle these stories with the care and the sensitivity that they deserve. And so that story was published in the AJC about 4 or 5 days ago. So you can read it online. It's absolutely incredible. And another story that I have not reported on for GLAAD or any other outlet just yet, but I feel like we can't come to the end of this podcast without talking about gay America's obsession with heated rivalry. I have not made it through it yet. I'm still watching, and there's also a huge segment of straight women who are obsessing over this show, which is an entirely different conversation for another day. GLAAD found that queer and trans characters dramatically dropped in our latest Where We Are on TV study. But then along comes Heated Rivalry, this sleeper hit from Canada featuring no fewer than 5 gay people in the central plot. Audiences are obviously craving LGBTQ stories, and I can speak from personal experience and say we're also craving Black LGBTQ stories because it's a desert when it comes to that. But these audiences are moved by these stories, and when GLAAD recommends a show, they go find it and they support it. And these fans are not just hockey fans or fans of the books or just gay fans. The Heated Rivalry audience is multidimensional across genders and ages and even global. So when a show is well done, respectful, funny, sexy, romantic, audiences show up again and again to say, our love stories matter too.
Yeah. I did make the mistake of posting online that I did not enjoy the show, so I would like to let everyone know, apparently I am no longer in the LGBTQ plus community, according to feedback from people in my circle. I only watched the first episode. I will continue watching because I was severely chastised, but I will keep going. But also I don't want to add anything critical to the queer joy section, and yet here I am. It has to be somewhat problematic if one TV show, is responsible for an uptick in queer representation. That can't be good, right, Darian, for the landscape of queer media? I mean, it's great and yay, but one show should not be able to move the needle as much as it does. That indicates to me, holy crap, we need so much more representation.
Is what you're hearing that we're going to get more LGBTQ focused content because of the success of Heated Rivalry?
Ooh, I like that. Is that going to happen? Let's do that.
I don't know, but I mean, if that happens, on one hand, it could be a really good thing, but then I wonder how diverse that content is going to be because we're 20 years after Patrick Ian Polk's Noah's Ark, and I'm still struggling to find content that reflects my experience as a Black gay man.
Yeah.
Shout out to everybody watching Heated Rivalry and being able to see themselves. Black queer folks, we automatically have to kind of put ourselves into the content and find ways to be able to connect to the characters on screen because the majority of the time they don't look like us. And that's my biggest gripe.
Well, we got to sit down and start writing our new Montgomery-based show. I'm excited. As the new year approacheth, we want to hear what you both are working on. In addition to pieces on polyamory, Sam, what do you got going on?
Yeah, so I'm really excited about the polyamory piece. It's something kind of new for us. And then also, this is going to be a classic Uncloseted Media. We're looking at ketamine addiction among gay men and the rise of ketamine in the party scene, and also sort of this confusing, contrasting narrative of therapeutic ketamine really helping some queer folks, and then how there's also the dark side of that with addiction and not having proper support or not having proper regulation, and how ketamine is kind of in these two buckets right now, and how do people make sense of that? How do people use it safely? And why is it so popular amongst Gen Z gay men right now? So we're working on that. And then also, we really want to include more bisexual voices come 2026. So I'm sort of leading that charge as a bisexual woman. And we have 2 panels coming up, one talking about masculine bisexual experience and one talking about femme bisexual experience. And I was so surprised how many bisexual men wanted to be on the panel. Like we usually only pick 5 people, and I had like 20 people asking to sign up and be on the panel, and people just really want to share their stories. So I'm really, really excited for that panel and that conversation.
We're going to keep our eye on that. Darian Aaron, in addition to, I have to assume, a new title change, what's coming up for you?
2 really important things that I'm really excited about. The first is a new campaign series that we're launching on January 15th called, wait for it, GLAAD I Found You. And so we're really going to be celebrating married queer couples because marriage equality is still under threat in this country. All it takes is one Supreme Court ruling to overturn that. And so we really want to have those narratives out there so people understand why marriage equality is important and how it's really enhanced the love that these couples in some cases have shared for 20 plus years together. And so that series is launching on January 15th. And I'm also going to be working on the next 2 dates of the Gen Z and HIV HBCU tour. It will land at my alma mater on February 5th. And then it's going to close out March 18th at Morehouse College.
Amazing. Now, I don't know if you know, if you add another A to the GLAAD I Found You, it's also the name of the organization that you work for.
Correct. Yes.
Nothing gets by me, folks. I am a marketing whiz. I have to ask you both, any resolutions? Sam, any resolution for the upcoming year?
This has nothing to do with journalism, but I really want to go camping more.
Oh,
I used to live in Switzerland and I loved the mountains there and the camping. And now that I'm in New York City, I'm like, okay, how do I still connect with nature besides like walking through Central Park? So trying to get upstate more, go camping, experience nature, all that good stuff.
I love it. Darian Aaron, what do you got?
Ken, I'm going to give more thought to this question later this week because my husband and I are going to work on our vision boards. It's something that we do at the start of every year. But I will say in 2026, I want to rest more.
Nice.
Rest is productivity. I'm so used to operating at 110% all the time, and I just can't do that any longer. It's not sustainable. So in between projects, I want to make sure that I take time to rest and that I take time to revel in my accomplishments from time to time because I haven't given myself permission to do that before.
That is so huge because it's not just for you, but other people can see you doing that and it gives them permission. And so I am looking forward to seeing that. Sam will not be able to see you doing that because Sam will be off the grid camping, but the rest of us are going to see you doing that. And what a 2026 I hope it will be for both of you. And that, sadly, is all the time that we have for this week's episode, the last one of 2025. I want to thank our roundtable, Sam Donndelinger. What a pleasure to have you back.
Thank you so much, Ken. This was so fun.
Darian Aaron, you know I adore you. You're coming back. Both of you are coming back.
Right back at you, Ken. It's always a pleasure. Thank you again for having me.
Again, I'm Ken Schneck, editor of the Buckeye Flame. And if you liked this episode of This News is So Gay, please share it with a friend. Subscribe so that you do not miss out on our next episode. Send an email on over to editor@thebuckeyeflame.com. That's me, to let us know your thoughts and rate and review us on your favorite podcasting app. This is your last opportunity in 2025 to support the Buckeye Flame because This News is So Gay is a product of our scrappy queer nonprofit newsroom. Become a recurring donor today for as little as $12.50 a month, which truly enables programming just like this. In the meantime, read LGBTQ+ news, share the stories of LGBTQ+ reporters, and support the work of LGBTQ+ newsrooms. Until next week and next year, friends.